Hey everyone, welcome. Today, we're diving into one of the most misunderstood struggles out there, addiction. We're going to peel back all the layers of judgment and willpower to see what is really going on inside the brain. We're going to explore addiction not as a choice, but as what it truly is, a biological process, a war inside your own head. This quote just perfectly sets the stage for everything we're about to talk about. It shifts the whole conversation away from this idea of a reckless party and brings us to the reality of a desperate escape. An escape that, so tragically, ends up building its own walls. This is the empathetic lens we're going to be using today. Okay, let's just get right into it. The common view, right, the myth, is that addiction is some kind of moral failing, a simple lack of self-control. But the scientific truth is, well, it's way more complex and, frankly, a lot more frightening. We're talking about a biological hijacking, a process where the brain's most basic, fundamental programming gets corrupted. And it's so important to understand that addiction doesn't always look like it does in the movies. Not at all. Today's addiction is often completely invisible. It hides behind high-paying jobs, behind the endless scroll on your phone, behind that one relaxing drink every single night. It's totally functional, right up until the moment you try to take back control. That's when you discover the prison you've actually been living in. So, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start by exploring that hidden prison. Then we'll get deep into the science, the hijacked survival code, what I call the broken joy meter, and the brain's cut breaks. Then we'll look at these things called environmental landmines. And finally, we'll talk about the difficult but hopeful path of actually rewiring the brain. So first up, the hidden prison. This is such a crucial idea because it just shatters our stereotypes. The struggle isn't always some external collapse that we can all point to and see. Nope. More often than not, it's a silent internal war, where a person can be crushing it at work, maintaining relationships, all while their own biology is slowly, quietly turning against them. Now, let's look at the first biological mechanism that actually builds this prison. We're calling it the hijacked survival code. This is the process where a simple want morphs into a desperate, all-consuming need, something the brain starts to believe is just as essential as breathing. Okay, so in a healthy brain, there is a really clear hierarchy of needs, and it's all hardwired for one thing: survival. These are the non-negotiables, right? Air, water, food, shelter. The oldest, most primitive part of your brain is totally dedicated to making sure you get these things, no matter what. But this is what happens when addiction enters the picture. An addictive behavior floods the brain with this insane, unnatural amount of dopamine. And that primitive part of the brain just gets confused. It completely misinterprets this chemical tidal wave as the most important survival signal it has ever received. And so it rewrites the code. It puts the addiction right at the very top of the list, above everything else. So here's the absolute key. It's no longer about wanting something. The brain is now screaming a signal that this is a need, and it's as urgent as your need for oxygen. This is why someone might choose their habit over food or family or even their own safety. It's not a failure of love, it's a hijacked survival instinct screaming that they will literally die without it. And this is exactly what Dr. Gabor Mate gets at with this incredible quote. The addiction, so often, starts as a way to just cope with some kind of underlying pain. But over time, the brain itself comes to believe that the addiction is the key to survival, creating this devastating biological trap. All right, next up, we're going to explore the second mechanism, and this one explains a really dark part of the whole process, the broken joy meter. This is the reason relapse is so common, and it's why life can just feel so gray and lifeless, even in recovery. Take a look at this chart. A good meal, right, gives you a nice little dopamine hit. Falling in love, even more. But an addictive substance or behavior, look at that. It creates a tidal wave, a spike that is literally 1,000 times higher than anything nature ever designed our brains to handle. We're just not built for that kind of flood. So in response to that flood, the brain does the only thing it can do to protect itself. It shuts down. It starts ripping out its own dopamine receptors. And the result is this clinical state: anhedonia. A beautiful sunset, a hug from someone you love, a promotion at work, they register as nothing. Just a profound numbness takes over. So let's just trace this path, okay? You start with a healthy baseline of joy. The addiction creates this massive artificial spike. The brain then panics and burns out its own receptors to turn the volume down. But now your baseline is gone. The new normal is a state of deficit. At this point, the person isn't even using to get high anymore. They are just desperately trying to feel normal again, just trying to get back to zero. Honestly, this is the perfect analogy. If you blast a speaker at full volume for weeks on end, you're gonna destroy it. Then, when you try to play a beautiful, quiet song, you get nothing but static or just silence. The speaker is broken. And that's exactly what addiction does to the brain's ability to experience the simple joys of life. This brings us to the question that I think confuses so many people. Why? Why do intelligent, rational people keep doing things that are so clearly destroying their lives? Well, let's look at the third mechanism, the brain's cut brakes. This is the central paradox, isn't it? They can see the cliff they're heading towards. They can tell you all the reasons they need to stop. They might cry and promise to change, and they mean it with every single fiber of their being. So why? Why can't they just do it? Well, here's why. In a healthy brain, there's a strong connection between the urge center, the amygdala, and the logic center, the prefrontal cortex. The urge says go, and logic says, whoa, hang on, let's hit the brakes. But addiction, it acts like a pair of scissors. It physically severs that communication line. The amygdala screams its demand, but the signal never even reaches the part of the brain that's in charge of impulse control. And there's a scientific name for this state. It's called hypofrontality. It's basically a shutdown of the brain's CEO. This is the biological mechanism that creates that terrifying gap between what a person knows they should do and what they actually can do in the heat of a craving. And this analogy just captures that feeling perfectly. Imagine you're in the driver's seat, you see the danger ahead, and you are desperately, with all your might, slamming your foot on the brake pedal. But nothing happens. The car just keeps rolling towards the cliff. The desire to stop is there, but the mechanism to actually do it is broken. But even if someone manages to stop, the brain has laid a whole other set of hidden traps for them. And this brings us to our next piece of the puzzle: environmental landmines. This explains how everyday life can become a field of invisible triggers. See, your brain is an absolute genius at recognizing patterns. When you're in an addictive cycle, it doesn't just memorize the feeling of the reward. It takes a detailed, high-definition snapshot of the entire context: the time of day, the room you were in, the music that was playing, the emotions you were feeling at the time. And these associations, they're called cues, and they become these incredibly powerful neurological triggers. So years later, a person can be doing great, but then they walk past a certain street or hear a specific song or even just feel that familiar stress at 5 p.m., and boom, an intense biological craving just ignites out of nowhere. Their environment has activated a pre-programmed response. This is why real, long-term recovery is so much more than just quitting. It involves the incredibly difficult work of identifying and diffusing these landmines, one by one. It's about consciously remapping the entire geography of your daily life to create new, healthy patterns. And all this leads us to our final section, rewiring the brain. I know, after everything we've just seen, it might seem impossible. But understanding the final, dirty trick the brain plays during withdrawal is the key to finding a real path toward healing. So when you try to quit, the brain activates what some scientists call the anti-reward system. It knows you won't seek the substance if you feel calm and peaceful, so it does the exact opposite. It floods your body with stress hormones, intentionally manufacturing a state of pure anxiety and panic. It creates a problem, this intense discomfort, and then it whispers that the addiction is the only solution. I mean, it is a deeply manipulative biological process. This loan shark analogy is just brutally accurate. The addiction creates the very pain that it then turns around and claims to cure. You end up feeling grateful for the relief, forgetting that the addiction caused the suffering in the first place. But, and this is the most important but of this entire explainer, the brain is not static. It is plastic. Through a process called neuroplasticity, it can form new connections. It can heal. The brakes can be repaired, the joy meter can be recalibrated, and the survival code can be rewritten. Biology can be changed. So, the single most important thing to take away from all of this is, right here, the struggle with addiction is not a character flaw. It is a profound battle against millions of years of evolved survival instinct that has been hijacked. It is a biological fight, and it requires biological solutions, strategy, and most of all, time. And that leaves us with this final question. Now that we understand the science, the hijacked survival code, the broken pleasure circuits, the severed brakes, the environmental triggers, how does this change our perspective? How can we approach this deeply human struggle with more compassion and more effective support for others, and maybe just as importantly, for ourselves?